Yep, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. This is a rapid fire webinar where we're going to spend the next bit of time talking about agents, mostly in Microsoft 365. So the Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Studio. There's obviously loads more things we could talk about in the whole agent sphere, but or in the agentic universe, as people may start to say more, but we're going to just cover that bit because we ring fence it. But please ask questions in the chat. Mel will respond. Just pipe up or come off mute and just ask away as we go. It's supposed to be more of a kind of, hey, there's a level set, and here's some examples of what we're going to talk about. So I guess the main thing everyone needs to understand immediately is that, if I can push the button to rotate the slide, everything's going to change. So the way you interact with all the tools that you use today is going to be quite different soon, or maybe it already has, right? So people are already using agents and they're already getting advantages by using them. What do you need to know to get ready? What do you need to know to keep up? All that kind of stuff. So we're going to focus today on these key elements. So 6 items. So we'll just do a quick level set. Everybody can get into a massive discussion around the difference between agents and bots. We'll take my one, my feed. Hopefully it's basic enough, that's fair enough and it works, but feel free to have your own opinion. But I guess if you're ever engaging with anybody to build you an agent, then probably the first chat to have is to define what you understand to be what the agent is and does, because it may just be a bot or it might not be. Anyway, and then we're going to look at why agents are reshaping things, the way we work, how we do things. We're going to look at some of the adoption methods. I mean, we're a few years into agents or Copilot within the Microsoft stack now, and there was a massive rush early on to just get it because everyone else is getting massive FOMO. And then people were kind of like, oh, where's the return on investment on this at the moment? So we're going to relook at that, figure out kind of the things people have learned and where people are at now. Then we'll look at Copilot within Microsoft 365 and the agents that it can offer out of the box. A few of them, not all of them, because we don't have all day to talk about it. Then we're going to look at Copilot Studio and show you some of the agents that I've created as demos to talk through some of the different use cases where you could use Copilot Studio to make your agents. And then in closing, we'll just look at what are the implications for your business, right? So what's it going to mean, what you need to be ready for, all that kind of stuff. How is the world going to change? So hopefully that all makes sense, but feel free if there's anything else you want to talk, save those questions, put them in chat. We'll kick off first of all, like what is the difference between an agent and a traditional bot? So in my world, an agent, which is the new flavor and very exciting and the key word across everything, but it is basically an intelligent assistant, so something that can make decisions, right? As opposed to a traditional bot that would possibly, if you thought about Power Automate as a bot, it would run on a scheduled workflow, it would go and get something, and it would take an action that you'd already prescribed it to do, right? So send me reminders of this, or a scheduling assistant in Outlook, find me a free meeting room, that kind of stuff, and then book it. But don't ask me anything more than that, or find the pattern of how I do things and then do anything beyond. So an agent's probably going to be more able to like look at me, look at what I'm doing, look at my schedule and say, oh, you've got some capacity around here. Do you want to do that meeting then? Looking at these people, they're also busy. Notice you talked about this with this other person. Maybe they should come along too to the meeting type stuff because they're in the same wheelhouse, that kind of stuff. That would be more of an agent perspective. The other thing to think about with agents is they will improve their functions over time. So they'll get better and better at working out what you need and what you do based on the activity that you do. And in Microsoft 365, the Copilots in there are analyzing everything you do via the Office graph. And so they can see who you have chats with, the messages you send, reminders, all that kind of stuff, the documents you work on. And so it can learn how you're working and then adjust what kind of recommendations and advice it gives you over time. So that's my view of agents versus bots. There are way more than that, but that's in a nutshell. Hopefully that would help. To step through an example of a new agent, and we'll just, because it's dear to my heart, we'll look at Power Apps, because Power Apps has an agent called Plan Designer, which is now generally available, and that will basically, the interface you'll see from a Plan Designer is you'll have the ability to ask or set out a business problem, and then if you look, I think, where's my mouse? Yep, up in the upper area of your Power App screen, you'll see there's actually 3 agents that help you work together. They work together to define your use case. So you've got the initial, let's look at the plan, let's look at requirements, and then let's extend another agent looks after the data model, and then another agent looks after the kind of the building of the application. So this little screen here just shows how it will, all I type in is I need my staff to check out equipment and be notified of due dates. That's it. And then the initial agent comes in and says, oh, okay, so what you've said I think you mean this, is that true? And then based on that, there's maybe some staff involved, maybe some equipment people involved. Is that right? And then it'll check in and check out with me there. Then it'll build out some data sources that it thinks I need. I can refine it as I go and train it and help it understand me more. And then I can get to the point where I can create the application. So that's kind of like an agent idea to rapidly speed up making something like a Power App. Whereas if I was to pivot that into more of a like bot example, so your scheduling agent or your scheduling bot inside of Outlook, if I'm trying to make a meeting with some people in the office, I've got this section here where it says, oh no, these people they're not going to be available, can't do it, 2 people aren't going to make it, so let's find a better time. But that's like a one-off thing. It's not really doing anything more than that for me in terms of like what a bot is. Still pretty cool and still really useful as a way to work, but again, there's a difference. And so when you're thinking about what you want to do in your business, be thinking about kind of, am I trying to make something that's going to help me work and decide for me more things? Or am I just more about, let's just get one thing done and then move on to the next thing? So it might be more of a bot leaning thing, or it might be an agent thing. So just be aware of that as you're kind of coming up with ideas. Okay, so why are things reshaping? So we'll step through some examples of this. And so kind of productivity, customer experience, and data-driven decision-making would be the key things I would call out as why agents are kind of reshaping how we're working. Productivity-wise, if I was to look at the M365 Copilot, I could do a lot more now. When it first came out, people were unsure how to tackle it, how to work with it, and now, through possibly people being more used to working on their own versions of agents they might be calling by ChatGPT or Claude on their phones, they're more able to understand the kind of prompts that you're going to talk to an agent about. And so we can do way more cool things like comparing files, summarizing emails. Summarizing emails is all around for a while. Comparing files has come out. Compare a few files, but there are ways to compare more. But some of the newer features like notebooks or creating a video or an image from stuff is now in 365 as well. So it wasn't there initially, but now it is. So we'll step through that experience. From the customer experience side, I guess if you're in a business where you're going to handle lots of customer inquiry, then you can put those agents in front. So if you look at Dynamics as an example, Dynamics 365, that's got like 5 or 6 different input channels where you can put an agent in front of that. So a voice agent come in, a web agent, or an email agent. They can respond to customers initially and then try and answer the questions and then be creative in terms of understanding who the customer is. And then, oh, this customer ordered that recently, so they're interested in that. And so work with the customer before it even hits the human, and then only hit the human when it becomes to that necessary point when they need to come in and check something. So for an agent that's in email, then the agent may come up with a customer response to handle a complaint based on prompts, but you may not want that agent to send that customer complaint response email back to the customer until a human's looked at it. So there could be a point where you say, yep, craft up an email that matches the kind of style we're looking for and understands the customer, but then send to a human to check that it's very good to send. Or you might just trust it. My advice at the moment, check it before you send it. That'd be the way to go. And then data-driven decision-making is another key area where agents are reshaping things. So we're more able to look at massive amounts of data and then predict on, say, if I was in retail or any other kind of stock control area, I could look at what's happening with the market, what's happening with the customers, what's happening with my providers, vendors, and let's work on like what's happening, and then let's come up with some plans so we can, if we've got a low patch coming up, let's put some stuff on sale, and based on understanding that, it's these items that we think will be the best thing, and so the agent can help me make those decisions. I probably know those already, but it's another kind of validation of like, well, you think you know this, but actually the stock levels of that particular product are a lot lower than we thought, so let's just adjust our plan. So in terms of making cool decisions, they're going to help us a lot more around that kind of data-driven based approach. I don't know if there's any questions coming in, but just ask away if any of this is unclear or if there's things you want a little more guidance on. Cool. We're going to scoot into some agent examples. So first of all, I don't know if anyone has used the Visual Creator Agent in Microsoft 365 Copilot. So we'll look at through 365 Copilot agents as kind of way things are interfacing. So I've got some screens and a couple of clips. So the Visual Creator in Microsoft 365 Copilot as a tool to like reshape how we can improve our productivity. I mean, it's going to get me 80-90% of the way I want to be. Like if I want to make a video based on some documentation or based on an image or that kind of stuff, I can make something that's going to build me a really good kind of item. If I push play on this, I think we've got it working. So let's basically create a funky video to help illustrate things to think about when creating an agent. And then if I've got more text, I can attach a file, or I can say, you can watch me type slowly, or I can use detailed information from something else I've got, and I copy and paste in a whole bunch of information around kind of like what I was looking for in it. The UI in Microsoft 365 Copilot does stay fixed. It doesn't expand more, but there's lots of kind of ideas where I'm thinking about how an agent could improve it. And so then I basically push play, and then we go off and it says, okay, cool, what you said is this. Is this cool? I'll try and create that. And then Microsoft 365 is using Clipchamp now to make videos for us. I hope this will scoot through nice and quickly. I do pause it a few times along the way. It can take a few minutes, so I'm glad I recorded it first. And shout out to Ash in the office who showed me how to do this initially, so I didn't know you could do it beforehand, but now I've got a video. I haven't got sound playing from this, but it will play, and it's kind of like picking up, and I don't know yet if the videos are AI generated or they're pre-canned clips that Clipchamp can work on and use. So if anyone knows the answer to that, that'd be cool. But it's talking in the background, and I can click through into, you get an undefined when you first open it, into Clipchamp, and you see the full studio, and then I can start working and making edits. So rather than having to spend time filming, spend time doing a lot of work, spend time building my whole clip of what I want to record, I've got pretty much all the way along, and I can still engage with Copilot to do more and more activity. So in this upper right area, can regenerate the video, regenerate the text, make changes, suggest updates that I want, but I can see the full clip created and it's all there for me, right? So in terms of a productivity gain, if I want to do an internal video release to my people, boom, that costs way more than $30 a month to create, right? So if I was to go out to the market, so an agent can make it for me and it doesn't need to worry about when it can do it. It just does it when I ask it to do it, right? So there's less, I can respond a lot quicker. So I don't know if anyone's used the Visual Creator agent before, but I can then save the video, I can share it to my OneDrive, I can put that wherever I wanted it to go, and then put it out there. And so yeah, I've outdone myself. Well, I didn't do anything. I just typed in a little bit of stuff into the agent and off it went and improved my productivity. And yeah, that's that little clip. Okay, if I push escape out of that. Cool, on to the next one. Sorry, let's get into that again. I'll just reshare that. Shouldn't have pushed escape. But if you're using Visual Creator in the Microsoft 365 Copilot Studio, Copilot, when you land in Microsoft 365 these days, you're going to see agents that's going to list out items for you, and you can see what you've done and other items on that left. So if you haven't used it before, I would suggest getting in there and having a play, understand the capabilities of it, and see if it does what you need it to for your organization, and then go from there. Okay, so I think we're going to also talk about the researcher agent. Again, this one took a lot more because I asked a question that has a massive amount of answers. So, but the key thing here is that this is inside my tenant. It's Microsoft based, so it's inside Microsoft 365, my environment. I've asked it to give me prepare for a meeting with Microsoft, but I could have picked a client name, and then that could have looked at all my data in my environment, so my knowledge sources, where that client is referenced or that particular customer is referenced, anything like that. And I can even choose this sort of meeting prep or ideas out of it, or just, hey, we want to expand into frozen orange juice or pork bellies or whatever. Tell me all about that. And so then it can go off and help me. I mean, I should know that anyway if that was my field, but in case there's anything I'd missed, then it can give me more information. And so if I play this one, it does take a little bit of time, but this will go off into the web. I can add additional documentation. I could talk to the agent and tell me what I want it to do. And then it will come back and say, oh yeah, based on what you said, just double check that's what you said if it's voice. And then it's going to say, right, I'm going to do this. And so as it runs, this will just keep ticking out. And the actual process for this took about 10 minutes to run because it went off and it kept going and going and going because it's Microsoft licensing, right? And there's like many thousands of documents just for one licensing SKU. So it goes off into the web and it finds a lot of information. And then asks me a little bit more about like are you sure you want to do this? Tell me what you want to do. And it will even give me a few kind of ideas about what I'm looking for. So I don't know if anyone's used the researcher agent. Just if I could type properly, then it would be less horrible to watch. But it'll go off and it'll start running through things. It'll take a while, and then one of the cool things I can do in here is I can expand on this right-hand side to see what's actually happening under the hood within terms of Microsoft 365. So if I think I do scroll down in here in a second, but it says basically I've got that, but then it starts looking at all the data that it can find, and it's quite fascinating because it can find any conversations I've had across the Microsoft and Office applications where I've talked about licensing, and so it does include my own opinion of what things are happening, as well as go out and find documentation that is out there on the web. And I could then ask more questions about refining it. It is a big process, the researcher app, so if I wanted to run things and stop it, I would have to stop it and ask it again, otherwise it will run along, and then it will then complete its activity. So whilst we're letting this run, we can see lots of stuff here, but there is a message here where I was talking to Nicole about licensing for a client, and it's kind of hides some of the client information, which is great, but also says, hey, let's use that information for discussion as well. And then it builds out a report for me. So I've got that. But the report's huge, right? Because it's gone off and done all this research stuff, which is cool. And I may not have the time to read it. So I might be just like left it to the last minute, because who else does that? And so let's kind of refine this a little more and give me like a 3-paragraph discussion, like give me the top points, give me the Coles Notes view of what it is. And it can do that. But I still need to check it. I still need to read it and make sure that it's actually doing what I'm asking it to do. So I don't know if anyone's used that, but it's sort of showing that we can do a lot more with the agents than when they first initially came out in Microsoft 365. I'm going to scoot forward on this in terms of thinking about time, but I do ask it to cut down to 3 paragraphs, and it does a great result, giving me less in terms of volume of me to consume. So let's scoot forward. Cool. So what we're going to do now is just jump into the adoption piece, the initial drama we had in return on investment. So I think the initial hype and expectations out there in the market have mellowed a little bit. There was a lot of FOMO when it first came out that you just had to get it, and Microsoft wanted people to start buying the product, but you had to sign up for 12 months, and a minimum of X amount of people had to be engaged with it for a full license. And it was kind of like, oh, is that really going to be worth it? And so that's changed. We've got more of a consumption billing approach, and then less licensing for everybody, but licensing for individual particular people based on their role and what they need to get from the product, which is a perfect way to approach Microsoft 365 Copilot. Like, give it to those that need it, show the benefits, show the value, and then it pays for itself really quickly. There's also a lot of initial angst about, wow, we've migrated SharePoint 17 times now, and every time we did it, we just said, oh, we'll tidy it up eventually. Let's just lift and shift it. And so all this documentation came up into SharePoint that it's then exposed to agents to look at, because it's sort of security by obscurity initially, and people were kind of like, well, that'll be fine, don't worry about it, we'll clean it up. Never. So agents have actually forced people to make change, but like COVID made people to make change and use Teams more. Agents are forcing people to tidy up their data on their internal intranets, which is great. And also with the ability to create your own agents, to focus on particular areas of knowledge in your organization, you can then ring fence those agents so they can be looking at particular published documentation that you want to expose to everybody as knowledge sources. And then there's the draft data or the old archive data that can live somewhere else, and you ask the agent not to look at it. And so you can now kind of manage the type of data that's being returned in your organization a lot easier. Okay, and then I think out there in the market, people are more used to using AI. Everyone's got ChatGPT to talk about whatever they want to talk about, and it's always friendly and always happy to talk to you, but it's kind of teaching you how to engage with an AI at work as well. Okay, and then big picture wise, less people going for 365 Copilot in terms of en masse, and then realizing that there needs to be a business case in terms of, am I going to save $30 a month US by using this tool day to day. And then in terms of then justifying that cost, people are more able to look at, well, how much time am I saving writing documentation? How much time am I spending in my emails now? What kind of summaries? And am I able to use this tool internally to give me better productivity day to day? And if your answer is a yes, I'm saving a couple minutes a day, then by the end of the month, I've paid for my licensing, right? So there's more kind of awareness of like, it's not just it's going to fix everything. It's not the new SharePoint or the new Teams. It's a tool that we can use that can improve how we work. Okay, and then also we can now use consumption billing within Copilot across all the different Copilots. So we can like either bill particular departments that are using it rather than straight into the Azure tenant and everyone gets it. Or we can look at, let's just run it and pay for it as people use it rather than let's license everybody. So Copilot Studio has a great licensing option for that. So it's kind of pay as you use it rather than license everyone across the tenant, which is a lot easier for people to adjust to and adapt. So then you can build out particular applications that you want people to work with and then show the value of that, show the licensing cost of that. And there are now tools that can show your expected billing amount based on the current activity of your agents, which will help you in terms of budgeting and licensing for that as well. Cool. I don't have any questions that are popping up there, Mel, so just say hand if there are.
I do have one.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Go for it.
Does Microsoft provide a use case show board like they do for Power BI of how Copilot can be used?
Yeah, there are a few different Microsoft Learn articles stepping through that, and there is a Copilot adoption brochure, which I can attach to after this as well, that has kind of like a playbook to how to use the agents, and then also kind of how to get your company in place and ready to use it before you unleash it on the masses. So yeah, I can provide that documentation. There's at least 2 files that I know are out there that are kind of glossies with pretty pictures of smiling, happy people using agents and making their life better.
Okay, and now that the Create Agents button is visible to most users, is there a way we can implement governance around its use or gain visibility into how it's being used?
Yes, great question. So yeah, so I know that the change to the homepage of Office, or yeah, portal Office or office.com is now the Microsoft 365 Copilot interface, and Create an Agent is going to force you to make an agent, and it kind of looks like a SharePoint-y kind of Windowsy agent as well. So you can get visibility of that from the Copilot Studio admin center, which lives under the Power Platform, but you can also control agents in the Microsoft 365 admin center Copilot extra section as well. There's a little bit of area there where you can enable or disable, but then you can't turn off Create an Agent yet, I don't believe. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But in terms of governance, we had a really good Microsoft 365 meetup the other week where we talked about change management and adoption. And so the key thing there is possibly no one has been like educated in terms of their internal business processes of like, hey, the Microsoft 365 Copilot screen or the landing page in 365 has changed. Is everybody ready? Don't push this button. Or if you push this button, be aware that you're going to do this. And if you do this, this is what you need to be expecting. So there's a lot more change management that needs to happen internally. And definitely with all different consultancies out there, we can help you come to a governance model. But you do get visibility of what's being made. And then to be able to publish any agent that you can create little agents for yourself. But you're not able to publish them out there unless you've got appropriate licensing or a consumption model in place. So admins will be able to control that and prevent people from publishing out wider as well. So that should help. But that's another little topic we could use as another webinar subject of like how to control, how to govern your Copilot footprint for sure.
Just scroll down there. How are orgs typically handing out M365 Copilot licenses? Is it initially to satisfy user demand and shuffling licenses away from users not using to users that are requesting? Like, what are you seeing, I guess?
Yeah. So there was the initial roll of give it to the executive because they're really important, and they're making productivity gains and they'll see the value and then they'll give it to all the rest of the people under them. Right? But in the end, the people that really need the value are probably the executives' assistants who are able to managing their mailboxes, managing their schedules and actually writing the reports. So the what we're seeing now is more business case rather than just turn it on and hope for a productivity gain. And then by turning on and with a business case, organizations are focusing on like, what are the improvements I'm hoping to get from this now, right? So we will turn this on for you because we see that you're now going to be able to write reports better or quicker, or you're going to be able to tap into our knowledge sources in a much easier way, or you're going to be able to compare documents and like your accuracy will improve, rather than we're just going to turn it on and let it write itself out and it'll just pay for itself. So that's kind of what we're seeing, definitely more focused and not giving it to everyone, giving it to particular use cases based on a request for a license, request to be able to use it, and then sure, we'll give you that, but show to us how you're going to use it, how you think you're going to use it, and what productivity you're going to improve, and then measuring that up against kind of like how much time am I going to save versus some random, it's just going to save everything. I hope that helps.
If I create an agent and then if my license is unassigned, will the agent still run? Can I use a service account to do the heavy lifting?
Yeah, so you can. So in terms of making an agent in Copilot Studio, you will find if it's not published that your connections will go stale after a couple of days and you're going to need to re-authenticate. I've got a slide that shows that for you. And then those agents can be created with service accounts. Yes, because you can create them and then you can then publish them out into your environment. I'll show you that as well further on in this webinar. When we say service account, it's a licensed user that we can use to make agents, and then that agent can then push out its model to everyone to use, and then everyone that uses that agent will then interface with a consumption billing, so that like 1 cent I think per question asked type stuff. So it's going to cost me for my license for one like user or people to use to make the agents, and then everyone that consumes it's going to have a different kind of model to interface, and I can use my Azure consumption kind of planning to keep a handle on how many agents are being used and what the overall cost is going to be. But yeah, you can kind of mix and match those licensing. You don't need to have a Copilot license just to use Copilot if you've published Copilots via Copilot Studio. It's just a slightly different model. I hope that's clear.
That's it for the questions for now.
Cool. All right, cracking on. So just summary, Copilot 365. Just a couple of other good examples of how we're using it and how it's better than it first was. I see it as a much more improved productivity enhancer for how I do my work, right? So, when I'm looking at Microsoft 365 Copilot, I'm also thinking it's been built by someone else and it's got some agents that exist that are kind of trying to hit as many touch points as it thinks it can in terms of doing stuff for me, but it doesn't know my role, my day-to-day role. So there are going to be gaps in terms of what I do that I might need a custom Copilot for. But in terms of overall Copilot to help me with my day-to-day productivity, it's still a solid performer. So if I take a couple of examples, so Teams recap. So you can have Teams Premium, but you can also have via Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, you're going to get the agents inside of Teams to be able to do kind of your transcript. And so we had that 365 meetup. After the meetup, I'm going to get the recording, which is cool. I can watch it, but do I have an hour to sit down and watch that video again, or can I use Copilot to give me more help, right? So I can see here, like I was at the meeting and I remember Steve said something halfway through the meeting. So I could click into that bit down there and I could find out what Steve said. Or over on the right here, I can see I've got the AI summary. So it's good to check that that's valid. But I can take the actual transcript. If I go to the next screen, I can go onto the transcript mode and I can see what people said. I still see when people spoke, and I can click on the speakers, topics, and chapters if I want to. But I can kind of start asking the transcript questions. So like Kirsty mentioned something about the 80-20 rule of adoption. Can you give me more information about that from the transcript? And so then it's going to come back and say, cool, yeah, I can do that. And it's going to come back with the info here that Kirsty said in the meeting, and I can reuse that if I want to. I could then try and find that inside of the recording, but here gives me a summary that I can use if I need to, because there are so many meetings we go to that are recorded that we don't necessarily have to kind of click in through. So when did they say that again? So in terms of a productivity improver, so that's awesome. The main thing to note here is that you're going to get the transcript, you're going to get all this goodness if you're hosting the meeting. So if you're attending someone else's meeting, you're going to have to ask them to share that transcript and the document or the recording with you at the end afterwards. It'll go into recordings in OneDrive, and then you can share it across tenant to someone else. That's kind of the awkward bit, but once you've got it, then you can still use Copilot to look at that meeting. You can also use the recap function inside of Teams as well. So if you join late, the transcript's already happening. So you can be kind of quickly catching up with your screen off, so that no one knows you're quickly typing away. But yeah, you can catch up, and then you can say, ask me some useful questions that show that I've been attending. If you wanted to, just a little trick there for young players in case you are hitting meetings late. Okay, next one to look at 365 notebooks that are kind of newish out there as well, but I can start building out OneNote-like notebooks that are created with Copilot that can allow me to do more and share this with kind of like a little project. We can look at stuff, we can analyze some content, and we can have notes all around it so we can work together and collaborate, right? So that's on the left-hand side of the Copilot landing screen. I can see that. I can create a Copilot notebook, and then I can say, give me a name, and then throw in some like matching reference documentation. So I just obviously did that one for today's webinar. And then I can start, well, what should we talk about? Let's make a page and let's discuss what we're going to talk about. And then I can sort of start collaborating with others on this well, this is the idea we're thinking about doing. So it extends it to a notebook interface where it's not just me helping my own productivity. I can start building up kind of ideas and thoughts around with an agent's help and with reference material as well. So we can start building up kind of a plan of approach. So in terms of, doesn't need to be for a webinar, it could be for a project, or it could be for anything we're doing in our company, but it allows us to bring the goodness of AI into kind of a place where we can collaborate more openly together, and we can see our results, and we can extend it. We can use Copilot to refine what we're doing as well. So just a good way to kind of like enhance our own productivity. So that's another goodie. If you're not using notebooks yet, that's another thing to look at as a cool part of 365 Copilot.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second because Ash is causing a ruckus in the chat where she's asked, when preparing to build a Copilot agent, would you recommend starting with a detailed flowchart and through thorough business analysis, or is it better to dive in and iterate as you go? And I'll warn you, there are BAs on the call.
Oh, wow. This is like, I thought we didn't agree with us with no hard questions. Like, thanks, Ash. So good pivoting and segue, because we're going to talk about Copilot Studio now as well. And so there's different ways to approach this. It's good if you know what you're trying to achieve before you start it, right? But the really detailed analysis doesn't need to be as fully fledged as it has been in the past. If I'm asking, say, a person to make something for me, and that person's going to just follow my instructions, because I can work with the Copilot to sort of give it an idea. So an example would be, I want to be able to compare documents and find bank account numbers in the documents, right? So I could write quite a big document about what a bank account number should look like, and how it's going to reference to how many numbers it should have, and then I can start using business logic in my BA analysis of that. Or I can just throw that into Copilot and say, here's what a bank account should look like. So I can create an entity in Copilot Studio that says this is the sort of syntax regular expression for a Copilot or for a bank account number. If you find anything that matches the syntax, then you can let me know, right? So then I can start exploring the kind of the Copilot, and it can say, and via testing and kind of checking, I can train the agent to look more about what I'm asking it for, which is kind of like I'm getting the agent to do a bit of the BA with me and a bit of the testing rather than loads and loads of work up front. So in terms of rapid prototyping and speeding things up, that could improve definitely. But you still need to kind of know the journey you're going on and be able to communicate that journey to the app in a really effective way. So I guess long-winded answer. If you're building Copilots where you're going to need to write prompts, then I guess analysis around the kind of prompts you're going to ask is really important, so you can start quicker. And if you've got like a prompt library of how you use things, it's definitely a way to go. If you're not too worried about making prompts, then I would say just get in there and go for it. Does that help?
I think so.
Boom. All right, cool. So here's the pretty picture of Copilot is the UI for AI. Everybody, just take a deep breath and enjoy that for a moment. So basically, you've got Copilot, your Microsoft 365 users, Copilot, and then Copilot Studio to allow you to extend things and then build out agents to build your processes. So to kind of analyze that in a bit more detail, another clip from one of the user guides that's out there from Microsoft, which have this slide in it. You can see you've got, there's a Copilot in every application that Microsoft's building at the moment, right? So you've got Microsoft Copilot Studio, but you might have Copilots in loads and loads of other applications you're using. But then Copilot Studio sits in this bubble underneath where it can talk to all of these things and all of the kind of data sources that you're working with, and kind of allow you to start connecting them. So to take an example, right? So OneDrive has a Copilot where you can compare documents, but it only really lets you compare 2 or 3 documents, right? So it doesn't let you look at a whole library and find information and knowledge from that library to compare against as a knowledge source. So but I can build a Copilot Studio-based agent that I can upload more than a couple of documents into, and it can analyze those as its knowledge source, and then use that as its kind of library to work against, and then I can put documentation against it, and it can do a better comparison. So that's kind of like I spoke earlier about how 365 Copilot's got loads of kind of pre-canned agents and activity, but they're not always going to match what you really, really need. So this is where Copilot Studio can come in and allow you to extend it and push on into the areas where you need to do your work. And that helps. Yeah. So in terms of a quick summary, consumption billing is now available in Copilot. So you've got your 1 cent per question type activity. You're going to use low-code connectors you can to talk to your line of business systems. We did another meetup recently as well. Cameron Dwyer spoke over from Sydney, showed how we can talk to Dataverse, talk to SQL, and look at stock levels across different warehouses. So it's a really good example of how you can actually get talking to external line of business systems in your environment. So great tool, great demo to look at. It's on our, I think it's on our meetup page if you ever go back and have a look at that. But just a good way to show how you can look beyond Microsoft 365 if you need to into other sources via low-code connectors. But there's pros and cons of doing it each way, right? It's still a low-code solution, so you've got to be aware of that and plan and build around that. And as I just said a second ago, look at the gaps that you're getting where you're not getting things from 365 Copilot, and then what you want it to do, and then use Copilot Studio to plug that gap. Okay. So if you haven't used Copilot Studio, I'm going to do a quick couple of shows here. Just checking the time. Got like 5 left, I think, so we should just wrap it in. So basically, Copilot Studio is going to load up like this. Like the Power Platform, you're going to be in environments. You're going to need to do stuff to make sure you're in the environment and you're licensed in that environment to use it. There are loads of really good resources out there now where you can show Copilot Studio. When it first came out, had problems with SharePoint, doesn't have problems with SharePoint anymore. Copilot Studio is focused around files and pages in SharePoint, but shout out to Matthew Devaney out there in Canada. Got a great YouTube step through about how you can talk to lists in SharePoint now as well, using natural language. So as an example here, so I built out a SharePoint list to show me kind of where we had a fictitious skills database. So show me who's got SQL skills in different environments. And so I'm going to extend that to show names, and we'll do a walkthrough of how to do that. But in terms of now, I can start using prompts and HTTP requests in SharePoint to get data back from my agent, call Power Automate, get information, and put it back in natural language into my agent in real time. So skills agent. So when you build out an agent in Copilot Studio, you're going to have the overview page. That asks you a lot of questions and tries to get you to be helpful in terms of defining what you do, but you kind of find you're asking it lots and lots of stuff, and it's checking. It takes a while, but so you can just like skip to configure straight away if you want to, and then it allows you to add your knowledge sources, add your tools, that kind of stuff. So a tool, it's been renamed. It was an action, now it's tools. Is like a SharePoint flow, right? Or sorry, an agent flow or a Power Automate workflow to do something, turn it on, check it in, and you can go into Power Automate and change it. Knowledge is like the libraries, the environments where you're going to go and get the information from. So you can start configuring that. So to show a screen of a document comparison agent. So I wanted to do a few quick examples of how I can compare documents. So I made up a few fictitious files using Copilot to write me some information, and I can add that to my knowledge. I can look at a SharePoint library as well, or I can do specific files in that library, or I could call a flow to then do a filter on particular documents as well, right? So I can manage that a lot more now than when I first came out. Your testing interface for Copilot Studio will be, this is a document comparison agent. I've created my knowledge sources, I've got it, and so I can test the agent on the right-hand side. I can start asking questions. Now you will notice that you need to open the connection manager initially to make sure you're in there and doing stuff. So to do that, you just obviously click the open connection manager if it can't connect for you. This is why connections can go stale if you're not using the agent a lot and you haven't published it. But it's just like in the Power Platform. I go in and I just basically manage my connection. I can redo it and extend it. So this is where if you've got a service account running it, this is the ideal part to have that in. So you're not running on individual users, you're running on like an account that's never going to leave the company, right? So I can make sure my connections are up to date, and then I can go in and say, yep, let's compare the document. So I was looking for just some information there around, I can't even remember what I was saying, but basically show me some information about the document. Compare this document. So I uploaded a file. So I got like knowledge source of documents and then another document, and I want to basically, is the document that I'm creating, does it match the right tone and does it have all the right sections that I would normally need when I'm sending out this kind of document? And so the agent can say, oh yeah, this is the kind of document you're creating, cool, this is what you're putting in it. So I uploaded a file to do that. So it's the loan agreement document I put in there. And so it's just done a quick summary of my file, and then to scoot to the next screen. So basically it comes back with information that I'm missing, and so then I can say, hey, can you recommend content for me to add? And it says, yeah, cool, you're missing this, this, and this, you should add that in. So we'll do a future session where we can show how you can then add those into the document. That'll be a kind of cool one to show. But that's kind of like how you can do it. So as an end user, so this is me testing my agent. And so as an end user coming in, I publish the agent into Microsoft 365 and Teams. That's like a standard connector. If I've got 365 Copilot or if I've got Copilot Studio, I can push into those channels. If I want to put an agent into a SharePoint site, then I'm going to need a particular license. I'm going to need 365 Copilot license for everyone that's going to integrate with that agent in that SharePoint site. So be aware of that. But if I want to push into Teams or into the Copilot Agents list on the homepage of Microsoft 365, I'm going to get a look that looks a bit like this. So I'm going to see my agents that are listed, and then I can do that. And there's the regular stuff. Write some funny out of office emails. Don't do that on work time. But then I can use this. I can click into my document search agent, and then I can say, hey, can you find me some documents that reference Holly? And then it's going to say, I found these 3 documents, and I can open them, and that'll be doing everything I need it to do. So I can start using it in a lot more ways. So this would be more than just looking at a library. This would be like just this particular knowledge source. So I can look at those in particular. Cool. There's a real whistle-stop tour on Copilot Studio. We'll do more on the meetups in the Power Platform group in the region. But I wanted to close on implications for your business. So that we're aware of the kind of things that we need to be thinking about. 1 second. Okay, cool. And let's go through. So main things to think about, key takeaways. You're gonna, like using agents, you're gonna get some operational efficiency, right? So you're gonna be able to improve the way people work, but you're gonna need to focus on how you want them to be working more in terms of where those productivity gains should be. You're gonna find people's skills are shifting. We're more likely to be grabbing data a little bit closer to the meeting rather than being fully aware of it. So there are studies out there that cognitive ability is reduced by using agents, which is true, I think, because we bring it just in time rather than knowing it. But that's the same as using a calculator to do some complicated mathematics, right? So I may not need to know too much about how I did it, but I did it on a calculator and it worked, right? So if I can prove that and it makes sense, then that's probably safe. But I again need to be aware of it. I need to make sure that if my skills are going to shift in an area where we're not necessarily comfortable with, then let's be prepared for that and let's train people around it to make sure that, yep, cool, you've used the agent to give you this information. What other checks and balances have you done to make sure that data you've brought back is correct? Okay, so that's part of the data governance and ethical risk management. Again, we want to make sure we're building agents that are going to be ethically sound. We're not going to be using them to like stalk people in the office and find out when they've been busy or not busy and are they filling out the right information, blah, blah. But we also want to make sure that we're putting guardrails in place that people aren't accessing data they're not supposed to. They're only, if we're going to do reports, we're going to be focusing on our published documentation, not all the documentation in the organization, right? So data governance piece is important. So you need to make sure you're tidying up your data already. If you haven't already done so, please do that. We're going to find there's going to be better customer experience and personalization. So you're going to be able to kind of answer questions quicker without necessarily involving a human, but you'll be able to get reporting on that and you'll be able to see what's happening. And then I guess the key things, like if you're looking for a competitive advantage and you can do things quicker than you used to, I guess think law firms can respond. You can look at data sources of previous practice law, find information quicker, bring that back. That's going to give you an advantage, right? Rather than having to go and spend hours, like all those movies that have the people in the library working all night. Don't have to worry about that anymore, right? The agent does that, but it just comes back with the summary. So you're going to get an advantage. So people are going to be in that space to make sure that they can keep an advantage. Cool. I think we're just at time, so that's literally everything I have to present today for this webinar. Slightly ran over a little bit, but I don't know if there's any questions, but I wanted to say thanks for attending. Appreciate you joining the call, and I hope that helped in terms of understanding some of the possibilities of agents out there.
All right. So, Rich, how many documents can an agent handle as a knowledge source at once? Will it begin to break down when using a large amount of knowledge sources?
Great question. So I can look at the SharePoint library, and I'm probably going to be limited. I think it's 5 or 6 at the moment, because I'm not necessarily limited by the agent's ability to do it, but I'm limited on the processing power needed to make those agents run. So I'll come back to you with a specific answer, but that's a great question. Showing my knowledge gap, but there is like an agent call or a throttling call in 365 that's going to impact how much data you can pull to retract information back. So if you are looking to analyze hundreds of thousands of documents to get information, rather than here's my published library of key information, then 365 Copilot may not do what you need it to do. And so looking at either a custom AI build or a Copilot Studio to see if that does it as well would be my answer. But I'll answer back on that for you. So just grab your details and come back to you with an actual number.
Yep.
Question.
Okay, cool. What is your view on the comparative value of these M365 Copilot agents versus OpenAI and other equivalents? What is your answer to the N-1 value proposition doesn't stack up type of statement?
I don't know the answer, but in terms of other using, so I guess the argument for using 365 Copilot or Copilot Studio within my tenant is I know I've got all my data and it's held inside my organization, right? It's not going out. No, the AI that's in there isn't learning, or it's learning from my organization, but it's not sharing that learning with other agencies or other companies, right? So if I'm using personal AI tools, then it's taking the information and I don't know where that's necessarily going in terms of training the agent. And so again, if there are some really good tools out there depending on your business use case to help you rapidly prototype other tools, like in the dev space especially. There's loads of tools like Claude, whatever you could use to help you. But I guess if I'm wanting my organization to work within our Microsoft 365 tenant with our 365 data, then it's an easier sell to keep it within the Microsoft bubble rather than send that data outside and then bring it back, even though that may be secure, but it's kind of an easier per licensing sell for me to hold it inside of 365. But that's a good answer or not, but yeah. I think think security, think governance, think about where you want the data to go, and be aware of the risks.
And what are some of the use cases you think people could do for a proof of concept for client services team using agent workflows?
Oh, yeah. So I guess look at the client services team and what are the things that take a lot of time. Do I need to go off and analyze things? And so where do I spend lots of time, say, looking at licensing, or lots of time responding or comparing products? I can use like a demo concept agent would be like, here's my knowledge source of all the products that we give to people. This is what this person is requesting, and this is what we know about this customer. What would you recommend as their idea? Give me 3 answers of what you think, and then from those 3 answers, give me 1 recommendation. So just speeding up your ability to respond to them, and also crafting a response back with a nice email back to them could save you time, possibly. But that whole kind of get me data and give me analysis of the data would be important, I think, as a demo concept. Yeah.
Awesome. That might be it for questions, unless any. Oh no, Blake's in there now.
We're taking questions from Blake?
No, we're not taking questions from Blake. He's too technical. But thanks for coming along, everyone. We will post this on our YouTube channel, but if you do have any questions or you'd like to catch up with Rich, just flick me an email. I'll dump my email address in the chat and I can set that up for you. And again, thanks for coming along.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. I'll leave. Bye.
Right.